My mother-in-law looked at the dress I was wearing with disgust. "It looks cheap," she said, loud enough for her friends to hear, trying to humiliate me at her own charity gala. She had no idea that the main auction prize of the night was a spectacular couture gown, or that the auctioneer was about to ask the famous secret designer of that dress to please stand up. She had no idea that I was about to be the one to rise. Before we get back to the gala, I'd love to know, what city are you watching this from? Let me know in the comments. And if you love dramatic stories with satisfying endings, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because we upload new ones every single day. Okay, let's get back to my mother-in-law. The annual St. Jude's Foundation Gala was the undisputed crown jewel of my mother-in-law Beatrice's social calendar. It was her magnum opus, a night where she could perform her favorite role, the powerful, benevolent matriarch of high society. The ballroom of the Grand Plaza Hotel was a glittering, overwrought testament to her taste. A sea of crystal chandeliers, ridiculously large floral arrangements, and the city's wealthiest people, all dressed in their most expensive, attention-grabbing attire. I hated it. I stood beside my husband, Liam, feeling like an anthropologist studying a strange, exotic tribe. I had only agreed to come for 2 reasons. The first was Liam. He was a good man, and he loved his mother despite her theatrical nature. He had begged me to attend just for a few hours for his sake. The second reason was a secret, one I had kept from my in-laws for years. The grand prize of the charity auction tonight, the item that Beatrice had been bragging about for months, was a one-of-a-kind couture starlight gown donated by the reclusive and anonymous fashion designer Vespera, and I was Vespera. For tonight, however, I was just Eliza, Liam's quiet, unimpressive wife. I had chosen my dress with care. It was one of my own, of course. A simple, perfectly cut sheath dress in a deep sapphire blue silk that shimmered under the ballroom lights. It had no flashy labels, no gaudy embellishments. It was a dress built on the principles of perfect tailoring and exquisite fabric. To a discerning eye, it was a work of art. To my mother-in-law, a woman who measured a garment's worth by the size of its logo, it was invisible. Or rather, as I was about to find out, it was an embarrassment. She spotted me from across the room and began to navigate her way through the crowd, flanked by her 2 oldest and most sycophantic friends, a pair of women who looked like they had been sculpted from Botox and judgment. "Eliza, darling," she said, her voice a little too loud, her smile a little too bright. She kissed the air near my cheek, her eyes doing a quick, dismissive sweep of my dress. "You look so comfortable." Her friends, like 2 well-trained parrots, chimed in. "It's a very minimalist approach, Beatrice. Very brave." "Brave is one word for it," Beatrice sighed, her performance now in full swing. She took my arm and pulled me slightly aside, though well within earshot of her friends and several other guests. "Eliza, honey, I know you have your own artistic little style, and that's sweet. But this is the biggest charity event of the year, my event. The press is here, and that dress—" She paused, a look of pained sympathy on her face. "It just looks homemade. It looks cheap. You are embarrassing my son. You are embarrassing me." The public, quiet humiliation was a familiar tactic of hers. She was a master of the velvet-gloved insult. "Here," she said, opening her diamond-encrusted clutch and pulling out a platinum credit card. She tried to press it into my hand. "Please, for me, go up to the hotel's boutique. Find something respectable, something from a real designer. Tell them to put it on my account. There's still time before the main auction begins." I just stared at her, at the credit card she was trying to give me. The sheer, breathtaking irony of the moment was so profound it was almost comical. She, a woman whose entire wardrobe consisted of the loudly branded flavor-of-the-month designs I so often railed against in my anonymous fashion blog, was telling me, Vespera, to buy something from a real designer. I almost laughed.
The old me, the me from a few years ago, would have been crushed. I would have stammered an apology, taken the card, and spent the rest of the night hiding in the ladies' room. But the woman who had spent the last 5 years secretly building a globally recognized couture brand from scratch was no longer that person. I saw Liam from across the room, his face a thundercloud as he saw the exchange. He started to walk towards us. But before he could get there, I looked at my mother-in-law, and with a smile that was all my own, I gently pushed her hand and her credit card away. "That's very generous of you, Beatrice," I said, my voice clear and calm, "but I'm quite happy with what I'm wearing." I looked down at my simple, perfect sapphire blue dress, and then back up at her, a strange, new, and dangerous sense of excitement beginning to bubble in my chest. "In fact," I said, my smile widening, "I have a feeling it's about to become very popular." I looked at my mother-in-law's smug, pitying face, and I just smiled. She thought she was the queen of this ball. She had no idea she was just a minor character in my own much more interesting fashion show, a show that was about to have a very surprising and very public finale. My mother-in-law, Beatrice, stood there for a moment, her credit card still held out, her perfectly sculpted face a mask of stunned confusion. My calm, polite refusal was not a scenario she had anticipated. She was used to people who were either intimidated by her wealth or eager to accept it. A woman who simply, quietly, did not need what she was offering was a complete anomaly. Just then, my husband, Liam, arrived at my side, his face a thundercloud. "Is there a problem here, Mom?" he asked, his voice low and tight. Beatrice quickly recovered, snapping her clutch shut and retracting the credit card as if it were a failed weapon. "Of course not, dear," she said with a brittle laugh. "Your wife and I were just having a little chat about fashion. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must see to my guests." She gave me one last cold, unreadable look before sweeping away, her 2 sycophantic friends trailing in her wake like pilot fish. "What did she say to you?" Liam murmured, his hand finding mine, his knuckles white. "Nothing, honey," I lied, giving his hand a reassuring squeeze. "She was just being Beatrice. It's fine." I gave him a smile that I hoped looked more convincing than it felt. "Let's not let it ruin the evening. I want to see how much the Vespera dress goes for." He looked at me, still concerned, but he let it go. He trusted me, and in that moment I felt a pang of guilt for the secret I kept from the world, but also a surge of fierce protective love for the quiet life that secret allowed me to have.
My silent sacrifice, the one I had made for the past 5 years, was the sacrifice of my own name. I was Vespera, a name whispered with a kind of reverent awe in the most exclusive circles of the fashion world. My designs were on red carpets in Hollywood and at royal weddings in Europe. My waiting list was 2 years long. My brand was a global symbol of a new kind of luxury, quiet, intelligent, and utterly uncompromising. And no one knew who I was. It had all started not as a business plan, but as a rebellion. I had come to fashion from a background in art history, and I was appalled by the industry I found. It was loud, it was wasteful, and it was obsessed with brand names over actual craftsmanship. I started designing and sewing my own clothes in my tiny studio apartment as an act of protest. I wanted to create pieces that were timeless, that were built on the principles of perfect tailoring and exquisite, sustainable fabrics. I was creating clothes that told a story. I was wearing one of my first creations, a simple linen dress, at a small art gallery opening when a woman approached me. She was the owner of the most influential avant-garde boutique in the city. She didn't ask me who I was wearing. She asked, "Where in the world did you get that dress? The cut is magnificent." When I shyly admitted I had made it myself, she had looked at me with an intensity that was almost frightening and said, "You need to make more. and I need to be the one to sell them. My brand, which I named Vespera after the Evening Star, became an underground sensation almost overnight. The demand was insatiable. With that demand came the inevitable calls from magazines, from television producers, all wanting to know the same thing. Who is Vespera? I remember the night I made the decision. Liam and I were in our small apartment looking at a dozen media requests. "You should do it," he had urged. "You should take the credit. You've earned it." But I had shaken my head. The moment my face is attached to the brand, I had told him, it's not about the clothes anymore. It becomes about me, my life, my past, what I eat for breakfast. It becomes about the cult of personality. I want the work to speak for itself. Vespera is the art, not the artist. She is a mystery. And that, I had decided, is her greatest strength. And so, Vespera remained an enigma. My life as Eliza, Liam's quiet, unassuming wife, was my shield. It allowed me to observe the world, to find my inspiration without the distorting lens of fame. It also, unfortunately, made me the perfect target for my mother-in-law's condescending pity. She saw my simple, logo-free clothes, my lack of interest in her high society gossip, and she saw weakness. She saw failure. She had no idea she was judging a book by its very plain, very deliberately chosen cover. As I stood there in the grand ballroom, I looked around at the women in their glittering gowns. I saw a dozen different designers I knew, some of whom I respected, some of whom I did not. I saw the poor tailoring on a dress that I knew cost more than a car. I saw the cheap fabric on a gown that was famous only for its label. My mother-in-law's world was not a world of quality. It was a world of price tags. And backstage, waiting to be revealed, was my masterpiece, the Starlight gown. It was a dress that had taken me and my small team of master seamstresses 3 months to create. It was made from a rare, shimmering silk that had been hand-dyed using a forgotten artisanal technique to achieve a color that was the exact shade of the twilight sky. It was embroidered with thousands of tiny antique silver beads that formed the constellations of the winter sky. It was not just a dress. It was a poem. Beatrice had been bragging for months about securing the donation from the elusive Vespera for her charity auction. She had been using my secret identity as a status symbol to elevate her own social standing, all while insulting the real me to my face. The irony was so profound it was almost a physical thing. The dinner portion of the gala was finally coming to a close. The lights began to dim, and a hush fell over the crowd. The charismatic auctioneer walked onto the stage, a spotlight following him. The main event was about to begin. Liam leaned over to me, his voice a low whisper. "Are you sure you're okay after what my mother said? We can still leave. No one would blame us." I looked at him, at his kind, worried face. Then I looked at the stage, where my mother-in-law was now taking her seat of honor, a smug, proud smile on her face. And I felt a slow, dangerous smile of my own begin to form. "Leave," I whispered back, my eyes glittering in the dim light. "Liam, darling, the show is just about to start." The hour that followed was a masterclass in social navigation, performed by a man I was quickly realizing was far more than just a handsome actor. Julian was my shield, my spokesperson, and my silent co-conspirator. He expertly guided me through the treacherous waters of the gala, his hand always a steady, reassuring presence on my arm or at the small of my back. He engaged my mother-in-law's gossiping friends with a charm so profound that he left them giggling like schoolgirls, all while revealing absolutely nothing about himself. He discussed business with Liam's father's colleagues, speaking with an easy, understated authority that made them treat him as a peer. And all the while, he would find ways to gently, but consistently, steer the conversation back to me, praising my brilliant eye for art, my sharp wit, my quiet intelligence. He was, piece by piece,
constructing a version of me that my in-laws had never allowed to exist. And I could see them watching from across the room, their faces a mixture of confusion and a strange, grudging recalculation of my worth. Finally, the dinner chimes rang, and the guests began to move towards the grand ballroom for the auction. The room was even more opulent than the reception hall, with massive crystal chandeliers and a large stage at the front. My mother-in-law, Beatrice, was in her element. As the chairwoman of the gala, she took her seat at the head table on the dais, a queen surveying her kingdom, beaming with pride. The auctioneer, a man with a booming voice and a charismatic smile, took the stage and began the proceedings. The bidding was a familiar ritual of the wealthy publicly displaying their own generosity. A week-long stay at a private villa in Tuscany, a vintage bottle of wine, a walk-on role in a television show. I watched Beatrice bid on and win a hideously expensive modern art painting, the applause for her generosity washing over her. She was the star of this show, and she was loving every minute of it. And then the moment came. "And now, ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer's voice boomed, a new level of excitement in his tone, "for our final and most anticipated item of the evening. An item so exclusive, so special, that we are still in disbelief that we were able to acquire it. I am speaking, of course, of the Starlight Gown, a one-of-a-kind couture creation donated by the legendary, the mysterious, the one and only the Spera." A wave of excited, reverent whispers went through the ballroom. The lights dimmed, and a single dramatic spotlight hit the center of the stage. Two assistants emerged, wheeling out a mannequin that held the most beautiful dress I had ever created.
It seemed to drink the light of the room. It was made from a shimmering, deep blue silk, the color of the sky just after sunset, and it was embroidered with a breathtakingly intricate pattern of the winter constellations, each star a tiny, hand-stitched antique silver bead. It was not just a dress, it was a work of art. The room let out a collective, audible gasp of pure awe. Beatrice, as the gala's chairwoman, stood up and took the microphone, her face glowing with pride. "Isn't it magnificent?" she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "We are so incredibly honored to have been chosen by the reclusive genius Vespera to be the recipients of her artistry tonight. This is a testament to the importance of our foundation's work." She was, of course, taking credit for my own generosity. The bidding started at a staggering $25,000. It shot up instantly. 50,000, 100,000, 200,000. It was a fierce, fast-paced war between a tech billionaire's wife and a famous Hollywood actress. Beatrice watched, her expression one of pure, smug ecstasy. The success of this dress was her success. The bidding finally slowed, settling at a record-breaking $250,000. The auctioneer raised his gavel. $250,000, ladies and gentlemen. Going once, going twice. He paused, a mischievous smile on his face, as he looked down at a card that had just been handed to him by a stagehand. "Wait," he said, his voice booming. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have just been given some incredible news that makes this priceless prize even more special." A new wave of murmurs went through the crowd. "The designer, the reclusive genius Vespera herself, has not only graced us with her presence here tonight," he paused as the crowd gasped again, "but as a final, personal, and incredibly generous touch, she has agreed to personally oversee the final fitting of this gown for the winning bidder." The room erupted in excited chatter. Where was she? Who was she? I could see Beatrice on the stage, her eyes frantically scanning the crowd, her face a mask of starstruck, desperate excitement. She was a hunter, searching for the biggest prize in her social kingdom. "In fact," the auctioneer's voice cut through the noise, "she has graciously agreed to let us thank her for her incredible generosity. Vespera, if you are in the room, would you do us the incredible honor of standing up?" This was it. The entire room was silent.
every head turning, every eye searching. A single powerful spotlight began to sweep across the darkened ballroom. Liam squeezed my hand under the table, his grip like iron. I took one final deep breath. And then, as the spotlight passed over my table, I calmly, gracefully stood up. The light, finding its target, locked onto me. For a moment, there was only confusion, a quiet, baffled silence. And then I saw it happen on a dozen faces at once. I saw them look from the simple, elegant lines of the sapphire blue dress I was wearing to the magnificent couture masterpiece on the stage, and they saw the same hand, the same soul, the same designer. The whispers started, and then the whispers turned into a roar, and the entire room, as one, erupted into a thunderous, standing ovation. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at the stage, at my mother-in-law.
Beatrice stood there, frozen in the glare of the stage lights, her proud, beaming smile collapsing in on itself, as if her facial muscles had been cut. I watched her go through a rapid, brutal series of emotions. First, a profound, almost comical confusion. Then, a flicker of dawning, horrified recognition. And finally, as my identity, my reality, settled upon her, a look of such absolute, public, and soul-crushing humiliation that it was almost painful to watch. The woman whose dress she had called cheap, the daughter-in-law she had just tried to shame for being homemade, was the international design icon she had been bragging about all night long. My mother-in-law had wanted me to wear a dress by a real designer. As I stood there, bathed in the warm, adoring glow of the spotlight, looking up at her horrified face on the stage, I realized I had just given her exactly what she wanted. I stood in the warm, bright bath of the spotlight, the sound of the applause washing over me like a tidal wave. For a moment that stretched into an eternity, the only thing that existed in the universe was me, the dress on the stage, and the look of pure, unadulterated horror on my mother-in-law's face. Beatrice was trapped. She was on stage, in front of every important person she knew, and she had just been exposed not just as a snob, but as a fool of monumental proportions. The gala that was meant to be her crowning social achievement had just become the stage for her most public and exquisite humiliation. The auctioneer, a consummate professional, recovered first. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, his voice full of a new, genuine excitement, "let's hear it again for the incredible, the brilliant, the one and only Vespera!" He began to applaud again, and he gestured for me to join them on the stage. My husband, Liam, was at my side now, his face split into a grin of such pure, unadulterated pride that it made my heart ache. He squeezed my hand and whispered, "Go on, this is your moment." I walked towards the stage, my steps steady, my simple blue dress seeming to shine with a new, powerful light of its own. As I ascended the small set of stairs, I saw my mother-in-law's face. She had managed to compose her features into a brittle, trembling smile. It was a horrifying, magnificent performance of a woman trying desperately to pretend that this was what she had intended all along. The auctioneer, a consummate professional, handed me a microphone. Vespera, on behalf of the St. Jude's Foundation, we are speechless. Thank you for your incredible generosity. I looked out at the sea of faces, at the hundreds of wealthy, powerful people who were now looking at me with a new, intense curiosity. Then I looked at Beatrice, who was standing beside me, her smile as fragile as a pane of glass. I said, "Thank you," my voice clear and calm. "This foundation is very important to my family," I said, and I turned and gave my mother-in-law a small, polite smile of my own. And I am so honored that my work could be a part of this special evening. The double meaning, the quiet, devastating twist of the knife was for her alone, but the grace was for everyone else to see. The rest of the evening was a surreal blur. The moment I stepped off the stage,
I was surrounded. Women who had looked straight through me just an hour before were now desperate to talk to me. They gushed about my work. They begged to be put on my client list. They asked about my process. I was no longer Eliza, Liam's boring wife. I was Vespera, the enigma, the artist. And Liam stayed by my side through it all, acting as my proud, gentle bodyguard, his eyes never leaving mine, filled with a love and an awe that was more valuable to me than all the praise in the room.
And Beatrice, my mother-in-law, became a ghost at her own party. I watched her from across the room. Her friends, the same ones who had smirked at her cruel jokes at my expense, now kept a cautious, respectful distance. They would look from her to me, their eyes full of a new, delicious gossip. Her power, which was built entirely on a foundation of social perception, of being in the know, had been completely and totally annihilated. The woman who prided herself on discovering the next big thing had just been revealed as the one person in the room who couldn't recognize a priceless masterpiece when it was standing right in front of her. Our final confrontation came near the end of the night, in the quiet, marble-lined hallway outside the ladies' room. She was waiting for me. Her face was pale. The brittle party smile was gone, replaced by a look of raw, wounded fury. "Why?" she whispered, her voice a low, trembling hiss. "Why didn't you tell me? You let me stand up there. You let me make a complete and utter fool of myself." I looked at her, at this woman who had caused me so much quiet pain over the years, and I felt not triumph, but a strange, sad pity. "I have been trying to tell you who I was for 5 years, Beatrice," I said, my voice soft. "Not with a brand name, but with my character, with my passions, with the person I am. You just weren't interested in any of the parts of me that didn't have a flashy label. You weren't mocking my dress tonight," I told her, the final simple truth settling between us. "You were mocking me. The dress was just an innocent bystander." A year has passed since that night. My life is different now. The secret is out, and with its release has come a strange, new kind of freedom. My brand, Vespera, is more successful than ever. I no longer hide. I have embraced my role, doing select interviews, using my platform to champion young, unknown designers, the kind of artists my mother-in-law would have never noticed. The relationship with Beatrice is different. It is strained, but the condescension is gone. It has been replaced by a quiet, fearful, and almost comical level of respect. She now asks for my opinion on everything. Last week she came to my studio for the first time. She didn't come to criticize or to judge. She came as a client. "Eliza," she had said, her voice quiet and humbled, "I need a dress for the symphony ball, and I would be honored if you would design it for me." As I sat there, my sketchbook open, a new design taking shape under my pencil, I thought about the nature of vindication. My revenge wasn't the moment of her public humiliation at the gala. It was this quiet, private moment of capitulation, this admission that my homemade vision was the one thing she now coveted above all others. She had spent years trying to fit me into her world, and now she was asking for my help to fit into mine. My vindication wasn't in shaming her. It was in my own quiet and unshakable success. I had learned that true style is not about the label you wear on the outside. It is about the integrity of the unique, powerful, and beautiful design of who you are on the inside. An absolutely perfect story of a quiet talent revealing itself on the biggest stage. What do you think of the way Eliza handled her mother-in-law at the end? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We love reading your perspective.
If you enjoyed this incredible story of a secret identity revealed, please show your support by hitting that like button and be sure to subscribe for more satisfying stories. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.